All right, hello everyone. I'm coming to you live from West Philadelphia. This is the first ever podcast of The Process with Judah Kim. Today, my guest is my dear friend Kevin Cox. Say hello, Kevin.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? You can't answer me.
So true, so true. So, this is a conversation that I want to start in my backyard. At least I haven't seen anybody really do a podcast or have a discussion about this in the way I'd like to ideally talk about it. Um, Kevin and I are both songwriters, and hopefully this is something that can interest you. Due to the nature of songwriting, which is solitude, I tend to feel like what I experience. I tend to feel alone in what I experience from it all, and like I wonder like what other songwriters go through, if they have like the same sort of joyous, the private joyous moments that I do, where you want to like take on the world or feel like you've been reborn, to be dramatic, or if they, I think what I'd like to get into is like some of the frustrations that can happen, um, especially as the landscape changes with music and technology. And if your experience has been anything like mine, you get these articles or emails that say stuff like speed songwriting, how to write a hit song, why your band isn't taking off.
Yeah, that's a
It can
favorite.
certainly add to this like sort of internal anxiety. I mean, you should certainly take responsibility for yourself, but then you add social media into the mix, and then it just like sort of changes your reasons almost for doing it. And when your reasons change, I think your art will change too. So all of this definitely comes to mind a lot. Hopefully, and further other subjects, playing in Philadelphia, playing in the music business, what it feels like, how success sort of tries to define who you are as an artist. Like, if you reach some sort of success, does it validate you, or are there people out there who can live without that validation, or is there somewhere in between? Obviously, is probably the best answer. Um, okay, so I'll stop blabbering now. I'll talk to Kevin here about his songwriting experience. Mine has been mine. We'll get into mine, but let's talk about you, Kevin. Let's talk about where you started and like how we met, why we're friends today, how you write a song, what motivates you, how you did write a song, and your progression. I know that's loaded, but I want you
Yeah.
to talk for a while as I have just. So go ahead.
Yeah. I think it's interesting how you were saying too that like it feels like a solitary type of process, and I think it's one of those things growing up that people are like you can write songs or you can't, and people just do it, and there's some sort of magic. Like as you mentioned with the change in technology and it changes how we view different parts of work too. Like a band puts out a record and you see none of the process in the past, but now you're seeing more of that process, and I think it's hopefully becoming less of this just magical all of a sudden this song appears type of thought process from people who are listening to music too. But as you get into it, and I think as you write more and more, the process for everybody changes. And it's something that you can kind of talk about and describe more. Like when I first started, it was just kind of, I'd write lyrics down and strum some chords, and that was kind of it. Like that made songs for me. I didn't really think too hard into editing it or writing extra parts. It was just me and an acoustic guitar, and not really for much of any reason besides getting it out myself, getting out those thoughts as I was like a later teenager, and I was just trying to kind of handle emotions that I had.
Quick tangent break. So you would start with your lyrics first.
Yeah, a lot of times, and even still, that happens a lot. Like I think for me, a big motivation for writing a song is I have something to say, and something that I want to say or something that I want to discuss, and so the lyrics are a big piece of that. And a lot of times the music comes second, or maybe they come in hand, or maybe I have a riff or something that comes up. But
Could you describe sort of your lyrical process and how you once? So first of all, how do you get inspired by? Is it like so you have a topic or a title, or and then where do you go from there exactly?
I think especially in the earlier stages, it was just like a line would come up and or an idea, and I'm like, this is like an idea that is like giving me a strong enough emotion that I want to run with it, and I want to think about it more, and I want to turn this into a whole song. And as I've sort of developed in my craft, a lot of those like one line ideas have actually been connected. So my first record, the In Between, ended up being a whole group of songs that followed along a similar theme about being in this in between place. At that point, for me, it was graduating college and starting to look for my first job, and getting used to that new lifestyle of being out of college. And then my most recent record, my EP, which I wrote for my best friend who passed away, and it was a topic that it's like, this is something big enough that I want to write a group of songs about, and I think because of that, I've also experienced that when I have an idea to write a song, like that EP, I wanted to write 6 songs, and I wrote 6 songs, and we had a lot of conversations about the differences between songwriters who will write hundreds of songs to get 6, and how like for the In Between, even I wrote maybe like 20 that turned into 13, which is not a lot compared to, we talk about like John Foreman, who's one of my favorite artists, and he writes 100 songs and Switchfoot picks like 12 of them, so it's a different process, but I think like once I have this idea, I just keep working at getting that idea that I initially had right, and if it's not working, just constantly tweaking until that song is what that idea that I had is supposed to be, if that makes any sense. Like I wanted for Brad's EP, I wanted 6 songs that followed a certain timeline. I kept working until I had that.
Right, it does make sense. So I feel like I'm wired a little bit differently. I mean, because for me the music starts, but before we get into my thing, so when you have a theme, I think that the hard thing for me, since I don't work that way, is how to sort of divide what you're gonna say into different chapters, if you will, or different songs, because sometimes when I come up with an idea or a theme, sometimes I just spill my guts into one thing all the way, and it's just like, what do I write about next? I want to write about this idea, but I don't want to actually repeat myself.
Yeah, I think for me, like the overarching topic has to be big enough that I have multiple things to say about it. Like my friendship with Brad, I have a lot of things to say about that, and there were different sub themes that I could write a song about. Or with the In Between, even like when you're in one of those in between places in life, there are a lot of positives and a lot of negatives and a lot of different strands of those feelings. So each of the songs had a different like a different idea that I wanted to talk about, like a song "What's Left Behind," which was about that feeling of leaving something behind, versus "Shelter," which was about using music and other people as like a shelter for that kind of storm in that situation. Another song of that record, "Cali Skies," which is about how like the more positive feelings of having these open dreams. So it had to be a big enough topic that there were many different subtopics for me.
Stuff that where you couldn't express everything in one song, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I can't give you a concrete example right now off the top of my head, but I feel like every time I try to approach it that way, I can't divide it because it's like it's too easily said. Sometimes even in one or 2 lines, I'll like, oh, that's it, I'm done.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
I definitely start differently. I mean, I was in the early years of my recovery, I met somebody. This is a famous songwriter. I won't say his name, just to protect his anonymity. But he was signed to DreamWorks, and they went on tour, and that's probably he made a lot of money through licensing and stuff like that, and I think that's why he was the beginning of him getting hooked on drugs. And anyway, so we met in rehab, and he said he starts with just a book of titles. He doesn't touch an instrument. He carries around this book of titles, and he collects titles, probably in the same way that you do with your ideas, but he compiles a lot of them, and then just like from there draws his lyrics and then does the music. For me, I try to start that way, but more often than not, I'm always drawn back to how I naturally do things, which is this kind of like argument or this wrestling in my head, like, all right, well, I don't want to necessarily fight against myself, but I do want to try different approaches so that I am not bored, because when I get bored, I feel like my music comes out bored.
Yeah.
But I'm not the listener. See, there's so many like different levels to this experience. You know, there's stuff
Yeah.
that like there's songs I don't really care for essentially that like people have told me, oh, I really dig that song, but you know, I'm just kind of like I feel like whatever about it. And then the songs that I really labor over are the ones that I feel are really great. Like they don't notice as much as I'd like them to.
Yeah.
You know?
I think that's a whole other level when you start writing, which, you know, you've obviously been doing this a lot longer than I have in terms of like.
What do you mean? I'm the same age as you.
You know, people would believe that. Right? People believe that looking at us. But you've been writing for an audience for a lot longer than I have. When I started writing, the first few years it was just like for me, you know, and when I put out the In Between, a lot of those songs even weren't written for an audience. I was just writing them. I didn't think I was going to record them. But then like the record for Brad, I knew people were going to be listening, and it definitely changes your thought process.
Yes, well, yeah, and your relationship with the craft and the process itself. So tell me a bit about that. So when you were writing for no one, what did it feel like? Do you remember the change?
Yeah, I mean, for me at least, I think the songs got a lot better when I started writing for an audience, because it wasn't just like, okay, I got the idea, whatever, I'm done. It was, this is the idea, and I have to play this in front of people, and people are going to listen to this, and like, this is the next step in my, you know, when you put out a record, you look at people, if they've put out like 5, 6, 7 records and none of them are any good, you're just kind of like, all right, well, it's, you know, this guy's just still doing it, but if you're putting out records, they have to be better, you know, you have to be getting better. So I think knowing that I had an audience, you know, granted small audience, but still, like, I knew people were going to be listening, and I knew I was going to be playing shows with those songs, it completely changes how you're writing, because you're thinking like, not only what am I saying, and is this giving me that release of emotion, but how are people going to react when they hear this live? What am I going to be doing on stage when I'm playing this song? Like, am I going to be playing guitar? Or can I play this riff this way? Or would it feel cool to sing this part this way? And it's like these other ideas that are coming into the song instead of it just being the feelings that you had.
It's interesting because that's not necessarily the answer I would have expected, honestly. Because I mean, or maybe you did give the answer, but are looking through it through a way more optimistic lens than I am. Because I feel like what you just described was, okay, now that I have this audience, I'm like self-aware now, and I have to like make changes to this music. Whereas like I would assume before, you were kind of laughing more and probably having more fun with it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's definitely harder now, but to me, I would rather things be a lot harder and be a lot better.
Right.
And it's something like, as a teacher, you try to instill that in the kids you work with too. Like,
but since we're talking about music and we're essentially talking about joy, I think, what does that mean, better exactly? See, it's such a subjective thing.
Yeah.
That's why I think this conversation is very important.
I think better to me means, I don't know, I guess it is really hard to describe, but to me, like, if you listen to the In Between and you listen to Friendship, I feel like at least the second record is objectively better, and the reasons why I think that, it's definitely harder to explain, but I think part of it is just thinking about writing a song as a whole instead of just chords and a melody line, which is essentially what I was doing before. So knowing that there's like this full product, there's a band, there's a drummer, there's a bassist, there's these other aspects to the song, and now that those were given some more consideration and thought, I think it creates a song that's more interesting to listen to and hits you in a more powerful way.
Like a more musically diverse kind of record, you mean?
Yeah. Like there's places where, and also I think part of it is like where it comes from too. Like there are bass lines in the In Between that I think were pretty cool, but I had next to nothing to do with them. Like I wrote the chord structure, but then Chris or Zoe played that bass line, and now even like, you know, if Alex Cardiel was writing a bass line for this record, like I had more of a thought and more like activity in what that sounded like. And then like a song like Sparks, I picked up bass and started, like that song was written on a bass, and that would have never happened.
So musically, they're more refined. But would you say you enjoy playing these songs more?
Yeah, I do,
Okay.
and I think that that's when you put in all this hard, painful work over time. The hope is that you end up with a result where you enjoy the song at the end more. And for me, it's like more of a confidence too. I'm on stage with songs that I feel like are better because of all the work that was put into them.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel better playing them because I feel more confident delivering them, and I feel like the audience is going to enjoy this song more. They're going to appreciate hearing this song more. Even like sometimes it happens a different way, where like a song like Shelter, people have just kept telling me that they like it.
Mm-hmm.
So when I play it, I also feel that same way, where I'm like, people are gonna like this.
So definitely external validation helps you feel some type of way for a song.
Yeah, for sure. Because I think that's the big change in writing for yourself versus writing for an audience. Obviously, is that you now have external either validation or the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
And so having people validate certain parts of it makes it feel more worth it. Because otherwise, I might as well just be writing for myself again.
Mm-hmm. I was trying to just think right now as you're saying this, like internal or external validation. It always makes me. I live or die by it. Like, meaning, if someone says something like, you know, positive, or I feel some like I've just discovered gold or something with a new song, then all of a sudden I feel more optimistic. I feel validated as a songwriter. But then the other thing happens, if it could just be one song, right, that I don't feel good about, then all of a sudden nothing I've done has any meaning. Like, I'm done with it. You know, I'm just like, I try and look through the inventory of the songs I have written to find some validation. Like, okay, I've got this one. You know, this is I should feel good. But then for some reason I just miss all of it, and I just feel empty. Do you deal with the same thing, or is that just me?
No, I do. I think, like, as you mentioned, you kind of like started to hit on this. I think in general, if we were to talk about a theme of some of our personality differences, I tend to be more optimistic with things, but I still also like...
Weird, because we're the same age, so...
And everyone the same age has the same mindset.
Basically, yeah.
All millennials do, all the Grubhub and everything.
We're not in bed together. I don't know why you keep saying that.
Oh my gosh. But yeah, I think I do go through those struggles too. Of like, if you like the last couple of shows I played, I remember afterward just telling you I wasn't happy with them because I made mistakes that I hadn't been making before, and it's like, if I'm not getting better, why am I still doing this?
Absolutely, and I feel that way about shows and songs though too.
Yeah, it's like if the songs from the EP for Brad had come out worse than the In Between, I probably would have stopped playing music. Like, I would have been done. I would have been like, well, what? I clearly put in more work and had a better team and had all this like stuff in place, and now they're worse. Mm-hmm. I would have been done.
Right. So I was going to write this down because I don't know if you're finished. But so as far as I wanted to talk about that because so as far as that EP, right? I know that you were immensely busy during that time. You were working in my band, Judah Kim and the Assassination, and I was working like a dog and being like an evil dictator, demanding all this. Kevin, play better. Work on those fucking octave bends. So I was doing that to you. I'm not painting you as a victim. I'm just saying how busy you were. You were heavily involved with that, and you had to do this. You were teaching, and then you were doing the summer school thing, and then you created this deadline of June 2nd, which you seem to work better with timelines. Is that true or false here? Let's talk about
definitely
that.
True. Otherwise I'm not gonna get something done if there's no deadline. One of the things that I really like about teaching is there's always the deadline of the next day. Like, the kids come in the room the next day. No matter what, they're gonna be there. And I love that because it holds me accountable every single day. And um, so planning the next lesson, grading the next test, like having that next conversation, they're there right in front of me every day. It's a new deadline, and I love that. I think with music it's harder because it's a job that you're creating. Like you're creating what the next project is. You're creating what the next thing is going to be. And obviously music's supposed to be involved in some way, but you could do a single, you could do a full length album, you could do a record for this specific thing, and all these things come up. So like part of that, yeah, I said so. June 2nd was a year after Brad passed away, and that was very important to me that we have a show on that date and the record be out that day, and so having that deadline for me pushed me to get that done. And you're right, I was extremely busy. I was teaching, full-time job, trying to write these songs like after work, and rehearsing with our band and your band. We were rehearsing once a week, and I was probably also practicing another day a week, either with you or on my own, to focus on certain skills like the octaves bends.
Yeah.
And so I'm doing all these things and trying to be a better songwriter than I was in the past. And it was really, really hard, but I think it would have been very easy for me if there was no deadline to just say, I'll push the record off, I'll push the record off. And at some point I might have just said, well, now it's too late, I probably shouldn't even do it.
I think I think looking back, like, it, so the EP was for Brad, and if the songs or anything show this kind of emotion, then it's appropriate. Like, if the songs at all have this undertone of not being rushed, but maybe sort of being a little bit time crunched in a way, if they have that, then I think that's actually a really good thing, because it actually reflects possibly what your internal world is going through this grieving process. Like, you're trying to come up with something sort of positive through this dark time. Have you thought of it like that? Or like, how was, in other words, what I'm getting is, what was your mindset? What were your feelings really as you were writing these songs? And do you think it would have been different, better, worse had it have been different, like, circumstances?
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot, because I have those thoughts, like maybe I should have spent more time on them, or I even frequently have the thought of like maybe I should have never put out a song in my life yet because I'm not good enough at X, Y, or Z. But I think the raw emotion came out because of, like you said, it was, I was going through the grieving process while I was writing them, and I think honesty is something that we talk about as songwriters a lot. Like, the songs have to be honest, and those songs definitely were. I mean, it was, like you said, it was rushed during a grieving process. So, and they were extremely painful songs to write. Like, trying to force myself to think about my best friend who had passed away multiple times a week in a way to be productive too, not just to like sit there and reflect, but to really think about what I wanted to say for him, and knowing that I got one chance, really. I mean, I can write more songs about him, but I got this one chance for people to listen and say, like, this is what Kevin's saying about Brad, and like this is what he's describing about their friendship, and to make sure that it had enough hints of stories that connected directly to Brad, but also enough hints that things were vague enough to apply to a broader audience. Like, all these things, I really think that given all the circumstances in my life, that record played out as good as it was going to. But yeah, if you were gonna change some variables, maybe there's ways that it could have come out better. But I think at the end of the day, it's just that those songs were honest, and I can hang my hat on that. Like, I can be proud of that. They were honest for what was going on at that time, and even though things were very hard. And I also like that there's some positivity in the record too. So even when I was like going through these songs were like destroying me as I'm writing them, but I ended up with some happier sounding songs than I had in the past too. So I feel good about that.
So I think what you're saying here, without saying it, is that you're saying that, like, the songs at that time, the record at that time, was you in that moment in time, right?
Yeah.
See, the one thing I think I I think. See, I think so much about this stuff, and it drives me to insanity, and that's why we're talking, because I want to connect with other songwriters about this process to maybe perhaps feel less alone, but certainly to network and communicate and maybe feel less crazy through this all. So what was I getting at? So I guess what I struggle with, if I were in your shoes, I'm not saying you should feel this way, but it's just what I go through personally, and it might just be my shit. I have a hard time looking back at stuff because I look back at it more like, yeah, it is a reflection in time, but something I'm completely embarrassed by, and I'm like, this is what makes me such a critical on myself as a songwriter, because I don't want to I want to make sure this is the best thing it can be, but that's not very artistic, is it? It's not going with the flow, is it? I mean, it's, if you think about it. So it's kind of like I'm trying to let go more these days, and like sort of let the songs be what they are, and sort of just try and be okay with myself. It's a really hard thing for me, you know. So going to what you were saying about like writing so much and intensely in a short period of time, it's kind of what I felt like about 3 years ago almost. Before I started Judah Kimmy the Assassination, I was at a place where, I would sit down with my guitar and strum some chords and then write the lyrics. That's typically how I would write songs, and then if it didn't come out like a certain way, then I'd like put my guitar aside, get real lazy with it, and just say fuck this, I'm no good, and that's kind of like my attitude towards it all. I wanted my productivity to change though, so I said to myself, all right, well, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna just sit down and write guitar riffs every day. 5 ideas a day. They don't even have to be complete songs, just little tidbits of stuff. And then after like a few months of doing that, I had collected a ton of ideas, and then I listened back and I would pick stuff to like just focus on, just so that I wouldn't like take things so personally, because I would have a big pool to draw from.
Yeah.
Working this way kind of like made me a little bit crazy though, because I would write every day still, and I would obsess every day, and I would sort of force things and get very like, if it's not coming out this way, I have to like perfect it and experiment and experiment and experiment. And I think I still believe that a healthy amount of experimentation is important, but I'm still trying to discover where that line between hard work and insanity is.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think also, like, if you talk about the different situations that, like, you and I were in and are in, you had, not that you have all the free time in the world, but you had more time to do that. Like, music is your number one priority.
I mean, I decided that.
Yeah, and for me, I haven't ever made that decision. Like, teaching has always been something that I've been doing, since I've been taking music this seriously.
And hang on, let me stop. The reason I did that was because if I had like a full-time job and then did it, I knew that I would have less time to do it. Therefore, making every single moment with my guitar an extremely precious thing that I would take probably very personally if it didn't come out the way I did. But for you...
Yeah. For me, I was going to say, I mean, a few different things. Because I've compared these two situations a lot over the past couple years. Like, would I be better if I did what Judah was doing? And I think overall, like, if I had to just say yes or no, I would say yes. I would be a much better musician if I was doing things the way you were doing. But I think the other thing, a few of the other things that come to mind is, I feel like, as we talked about before, with a deadline for me, that makes me more productive. So I actually, when I have the full-time job, when I spend the time, like you said, it is precious time. It was precious time, and I had to be hard on myself. But I think ultimately it led to me actually being more productive. I don't think I have the level of discipline that you have. So being able to wake up every day and say, I'm going to get 5 ideas down, I think that that's something that I could plan for. But more often than not, if we were going to like call each other at the end of the day and be like, so did you have 5 ideas? I think way more often than not, you would say yes and I would say no. And I think it's something that like I want to change about myself, but sometimes I just don't have that discipline when things are so wide open. Like I said, at teaching, I go to my job and the people are there and
Right.
I'm held accountable. But if I don't have a team to hold me accountable, sometimes I really struggle.
So what you're right. So you would get lazy in that regard.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
is it so then let's talk about this. So what makes you lazy about it? Do you start all of a sudden do you fear? You get locked up in like a fear, like 5 ideas. I mean, and again, these weren't like when I was doing this. They weren't songs. They were just like maybe a measure's worth of music, a guitar riff. You know?
Yeah. I don't think it was. I don't think it's fear. I think it's just like I could do this tomorrow, kind of thing.
Like I could just do 10 tomorrow and
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
make it up somehow.
And I've done those things in my life enough times and then got myself into that trap. And again, the thing that's different about music is if I did that in something with teaching, eventually there's a deadline. Like, so if I'm like, I can just grade this tomorrow, and then I do that a few days in a row, I have a lot of stuff to grade one day. But I'm going to do it. I'm going to get it done because I have to. But I haven't felt that way with music except for when I set those deadlines. Like I could say, I'll just do I'll do 10 tomorrow instead of 5 and 5. And then eventually I'm just going to say, all right, never mind, let's start over. 5 a day. Like we'll start now.
Well, I mean, I guess you know that about yourself, or do you? Maybe you should put yourself to the test and like try it, because I know you feel like you're in a slump right now, or at least in a place of limbo at the moment. No?
I am, yeah. I am right now.
Like where you're gonna go, who are you with this thing, and let's talk about that.
Yeah, because I think like over the past couple years, if you were to ask me where I'm at with music, the answer would be different a lot of times. But resoundingly over the past couple years, it's been that I'm getting more serious about it. And there was a lot of those debates between me and my close friends, you know, what should I quit teaching and just focus on music, or where is the balance? And right now I'm in a place where I haven't done much of anything related to music in the past 2 months. You know, we played a show in mid to late December, and since then I haven't really been doing anything. And I think part of that is because I have needed a rest after the things that have like gone on in the music world for us over the past year or so. Like after Judah Kim and the assassination broke up, to just take some time, and I think while you were taking some time to work through that,
I was so depressed, man. Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
Go ahead, sorry.
Well, while you were going through that, I was still trying to finish up these last couple of shows for my project, and I didn't have time to actually sit down and think about it and reflect on it and to work through the feelings, like. And so that was going on, and I had played these last couple of shows myself that I wasn't really that happy with, and I'm kind of losing steam over where I'm at in terms of like I just put out this record for Brad, but then I don't think I marketed it besides within this group of people, like except for with the community that it was actually like helping in terms of the grieving process,
friends and family and
yeah, that sort of thing. But I didn't like try to push it on Spotify or anything like that. I mean, it's there, but I didn't like do playlisting or anything like that. It's just
the reasons behind that, or just you
just lost the steam. I think again, for me, I need a good team in place to help me be accountable to doing work, and because even though I'm playing shows with you and Alex and Steven, like, in terms of how far my music goes, it's on me. Mm-hmm. If I want to stop, it'll stop. If I want to keep going, it'll keep going. And so I think I just, like, lost that accountability for myself. And so now I'm in this place where it's just, like, what do I do next? Do I think about that and decide that I need to be in a band? Do I think about that and decide that I'm not going to push it to the professional level, but just kind of do this on the weekends once in a while for fun? Am I going to stop? Because there's also, as much as we don't want this to be the case, there's always financial pieces to the puzzle too. Like, recording a record costs money. Should I keep doing that? Should I keep spending money on that? A lot of questions, which I'm sure most musicians can relate to.
Yeah, I mean,
questioning.
Why don't you just do it, and to the degree it happens, I suppose,
And that was another thing. You said something similar to me maybe a month or two ago, where you're just like, stop putting pressure on yourself to do stuff. Like, stop putting pressure on yourself to have to play guitar and get better at it and that sort of thing. And I was like, you know what? Let me just actually just go with the flow and see what I feel. Like, I look at some of my friends who are excellent guitar players, for example, like Alex Sadik, he's a tremendous vocalist, but also just he works super hard at guitar and is really, really talented with it because of all of his hard work. And I'm like, is that what I should be doing? Like, should I be playing a lot of guitar? But I think over the past 2 months, I've been being more honest with myself too. I'm like, I like writing songs and I like performing music, but it's not necessarily that I love the guitar itself. I love music.
Right.
I like guitar. I don't love it. Like, I'm not gonna sit down and grind away at it for 3 hours a day to become this, like, shredder of a guitar player.
Right. The comparative mindset, I suppose. I think we all can suffer from it. And as I mentioned at the very beginning of this, it's the social media aspect doesn't help, and it's pretty obvious why. We don't need to get into that. But I discovered that a long time ago. First, when I picked up the guitar, I was drawn to it, but then because I always sang from as soon as I could. My earliest memories, like, not my earliest memory, but as far back as I can remember, I always sang. So then when the guitar came along, it was like, I was drawn to more like John Lennon and learning Beatles songs and stuff. I wasn't like drawn to becoming Jimi Hendrix or Jimmy Page, even though like I still was sort of drawn to that. And then learning those songs and growing up when I did. I don't know. Maybe I'm not listening to as much music these days, but I feel like there's not enough abstract visual stuff in lyrics as much as there maybe was back then. And there's probably people listening now like, yeah, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Blah, blah, blah.
He doesn't know about so and so.
Yeah. So what is he talking about? Does he not listen? At least that's what I feel. I guess the extreme example, I because I hear it everywhere. It's like pop country is just very, they do talk about like these pickup trucks, so that's very visual. But I'm talking about like just the lyrics all make sense. They all there's no poetry in it. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, like there are some things in some older songs where you're just like, that sounds cool, but like, what are they talking about?
Right, but and
it would spark debate almost.
But see, here's the thing though. I think I started out very much in that abstract kind of realm, not because I knew what I was doing, because I didn't know what I was doing. So I was like, yeah, these words sound cool, and maybe they'll create some sort of emotional vibe. I don't know what I was thinking, honestly. I was like, 14 or whatever back then, and then I've through the years have become a lot more like literal and a lot more like straight storytelling without much poetry in it. But now I want to go back to that abstract world. I think I've been listening to a lot of Elbow. They're such a great band. The lyrics are so like they're very romantic, and like there's a lot of love songs in them. But if you read them straight up, you're like, what the hell is he talking about? But I want to go back to that abstract realm because I think I love flowery, beautiful words. But this time I want to go in with more intent and knowing that I'm not confusing my listener, but to add some more flavor and color to the words. Because often I'll find if I'm sitting with a guitar, like I said, my natural inclination is to like sit with a guitar or a rhythm or whatever it is. And then I'll sing, and then a word or a phrase will come out, and I'm like, all right, what's this about, though? And then I'll get hooked on that phrase, and it's hard to change that because the vowel sounds so good when you sing it. It's comfortable, it's easy, and then if you try and change that, it becomes like sort of forced or something that you're just like, this is not what it's supposed to feel like, but it makes more sense. So there's a struggle there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure. I think because I think I've come from the other side where a lot of times what I'm saying is very literal, and like that's how I started. And I think about like my influences, Switchfoot obviously being the biggest. Other bands like them, like Reliant K, where they're talking about emotions, but they're kind of like straightforward with them sometimes. But John does what I'm not yet able to do, and he uses enough metaphor and simile to make it like you're talking about. You have to think a little bit more, but he's still, I would say, on the more literal side. Like his metaphors, it doesn't take like. I was about to say it doesn't take a rocket scientist, but that makes no sense because they wouldn't be analyzing the structure.
I guess it's not like that. I want to write songs that make you stroke your chin, which is like my favorite thing to do, as you know.
Your favorite emoji too.
My favorite emoji is the chin stroke emoji. It is. It was designed for me. But like, yeah. So I'll take it like for U2, for example, Bono, the song "Kite" off their album "All That You Can't Leave Behind." So that song is about his father dying. And his relationship, father to son, little boy. And immediately Kite strikes up, drifting along, not knowing where you're going. Also, when you're a kid playing with a kite. It's those kind of words that I want to like strike and convey. Stuff that you don't have to think about, but stuff that actually just makes you feel a certain way.
Oh, yeah.
That's the kind of stuff.
That's the beautiful,
like,
that's the perfect place to be, I feel like.
Yeah.
Because we can all write songs about a father-son relationship. Mm-hmm. Whether you had a good one, bad one, or not, you can write one that's even the opposite of your experience. If it's like directly, I think most people can do that. But yeah, to be able to find that perfect word that everyone's like, oh yeah, kite. Like when you said that, I imagined like a father and son at a park flying a kite and like
a simple word, but also just simple flowery language is just on its own it is just a beautiful read. That's what I'm working on now, is to try and make every aspect of the song just on its own like a standalone piece of art.
Yeah. I mean, I think those are some of the things about Switchfoot that I want to get better at too. Is that they have those lyrics like "the shadow proves the sunshine." When I say it, it feels almost literal to me now because I've thought about that idea for so long now that's like an anthem in my life. Mm-hmm. Whenever times are tough, that means there's sunlight somewhere else. Otherwise, like there's something good somewhere else. Otherwise, you wouldn't have that comparison to make that things are bad right now. And so like the idea that a shadow proves that there's sunshine somewhere else.
Yeah. I don't know. And see, that's so important because it like stuff like that makes you not only feel, but then you carry it with you, like you're saying, in your life, and then you see it pop up in places, and you're just like, oh, there it is. It can reassure you and remind you of the song, or help you, go through what you're going through. And I guess I don't know what it was, but I felt like back in my Stone Throne days, back in like 2010-ish or so, I just remember this like barking sort of fear, if you will. After I was writing songs, like this makes no sense. This is so stupid. Like, because it wasn't literal enough. But I certainly was hiding behind abstractness and stuff like that. But I don't. But I want to use abstractness now, but with a different intent, like I'm saying. Like, 'cause this time I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And sort of know what I want to say. Not always though, and that's where I'll hit the walls sometimes. Sometimes I will start off with an idea, and that's when it's easiest. I think when you know what you're writing about, when you want, you have that goal or whatever.
Yeah.
Sometimes I will more often than not, I'll kind of just write for writing's sake, just write a lot of nonsense, and sometimes a phrase will stick.
Yeah.
And essentially the idea forms from the words. Have you ever tried anything like that, or?
Yeah, kind of like a stream of consciousness, just like getting it out there. I've tried it. I think
it's way more frustrating for me.
It is. I was gonna say it's never actually worked for me. Like it's never actually given me a song where I was like, yeah, we're gonna use that. I think I think for me, I think my life is like that, where I'm constantly thinking. And then I have this stream of consciousness going on all the time, and then the phrase hits me in my head, and I'm like, okay, now we're gonna write. The shadow proves the sunshine type of phrase like pops up.
Right.
and then I'm like, all right, now I'm gonna write.
Okay, go
Which is also different, but this is also a circumstantial difference too. Like because music's not my job, I don't have to necessarily force myself to write all the time. So I can wait.
Right.
And I think because of that, I write less songs than a professional songwriter, but I still feel pretty good about the ones that I put out there. It's like I feel like I almost have a higher % success rate, but it's because I'm waiting so long, which isn't necessarily a good thing if you're thinking just in terms of songwriting.
Well, I think it can be, and I think that's what I've been trying to get at is like there is a line between hard work and insanity, and I don't think, and we both struggle with like the idea that something in our process or something in our marketing or in our business validates us as artists or songwriters. I mean, that's probably just garbage, honestly. Like, but then you have to be careful because then you can justify yourself into laziness too.
You can, yeah. And I think that's a big part of that struggle too. I think even for me, just as a person, I'm really good at coming up with justifications or reasons or arguments for or against something. So
that's where a creative mind works against you.
Yeah, I can manipulate myself into doing nothing.
So at the end of the day, it's like I think we are who we are because it's like I'd rather be fucking crazy than lazy. You know?
Yeah, it would be. I think it's so cool. Like Dr. House on. Have you ever seen that show?
Mm-hmm.
He's just like a crazy doctor who's like a genius. Comes up with, but he has like a lot of problems with like taking Vicodin and stuff. But like I've always grown up and lived like thinking about those people that it's like they're like something's a little off with that person. They're a little crazy, but I love them for it because they're so good at this or that.
Yeah.
Whereas I obviously respect and care about people who are just like, who are like more normal and sane and just like genuinely like well-rounded good people who don't have like one particular thing that they're brilliant at, but there's like that mad genius type of appeal.
Right, and that becomes kind of like bullshit, honestly, like that mad genius appeal, because you have to like, you feel like you have to live up to that character, or like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
Like you kind of harking back to what you were saying earlier about when you're writing your lyrics, you're like, all right, now I'm gonna prove this shadow proves the sunshine line, meaning like John Foreman's in my head. What would he do?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like you start to think like your heroes. And it's helped me write and finish songs, or at least start from a place that I'd like to. Mm-hmm. But perhaps that's not being very honest with yourself.
Yeah.
I wonder about that, because I probably might be taking it too deep, but like because I all the best music has been ripped off from everybody else. So
right.
I don't know. There's also a fine line between imitation and using influence.
And even just the thought that like, okay, I'm going to think here for a second, what would John Foreman do in this situation? Guaranteed, almost every single person that ever listens to that song is not going to know that I did that in that moment. Like,
right.
They're not really going to be able to pick up the things that seem like such a clear connection to me.
Yeah.
Like, I've written songs where I'm like, I'm going to model this song off of this other song. And the end product, I think most people would have no idea that I ever did that. Because it isn't actually as close as I thought it was going to be, but like you said, it gives you a spot to complete things, to take the next step, to work towards a finished product.
Yeah, I think I'm. So over the years, I've always tried to imitate my heroes. I think the first thing was like Billy Joe from Green Day. Like my older brother had a white Stratocaster that I still play today. That Billy Joe had like a lime green Stratocaster, and like I would hang my strap all low and fucking like strum just like him. And then when no one was looking, I would go into the garage and like crank his amp and play, and then I would shake my head just like
yeah.
And then like I guess it came out in my singing too, because people would tell me, "Oh, you sound like Billy Joe from Green Day," but not in a complimentary way, very like dork, like
Yeah.
And then after I sort of grew out of that, like I moved to Tom York from Radiohead. I was absolutely just like obsessed with that, and I sort of tried to mimic that style, and people would be, "Oh, you sound like Tom York from Radiohead." Again, not in a very complimentary way. So I guess I'm like sensitive about that in a sense, like because as I'm kind of growing out into my own voice and things, it's like, all right, you don't want to do this. You want to try what's, you start to get, or at least start to get obsessed with like, oh, what's your original thought? What's your original feelings? But
yeah, I think it's like what specific aspects are you taking and how far are you taking them? Like if I was gonna literally try to imitate a certain singer's voice all the time, then you might get those things. But like for me, for example, pulling from Switchfoot and 21 Pilots is like two of my bigger influences. They're different enough that like people will point out certain things that are similar, but like my music isn't really like 21 Pilots almost at all.
Yeah.
But there's like certain like things that I've pulled from them, like from their Vessel album. There's a lot of like anxiety ridden type of behaviors and lyrics and things that at times would appear in like one of my performances. Right. Or people have said like my stage presence seems similar to John Foreman's sometimes.
Oh, that's cool.
Cool.
So like stuff that you wouldn't necessarily that people wouldn't necessarily grab like right away, just like elements here and there.
Yeah, like Olivia Keithley, who had come to a bunch of shows in a row and had seen Switchfoot with me and things and like watch videos of them. She was like, there's a specific time where you stand the way that John stands, and it's like that's like a very specific thing that it takes somebody like Olivia, who I was spending a great deal of time with at that point in time, to like for her to realize that. And like that's why someone else might get the sense of like, oh, John and you have this similar presence.
That's so funny. I mean, I think it's awesome. Like it's awesome for you to actually share that, because I think and for me to share about Billy Joe, because like it's just, I think it might be embarrassing for a lot of other people, but if you think about like even the greatest like it's like Led Zeppelin or like Aerosmith, right? You can say Aerosmith was ripping off Robert Plant on stage, like just the whole way he dances and like with the microphone. Same with Chris Robinson from the Black Crowes. He's very much like he's mimicking Robert Plant, and there's just so much stuff that you borrow from other people. I think because that's what inspires you. I think, right, to keep going.
Yeah, and like I mean, even people. I was very excited to start to hear about some of 21 Pilots' influences, because this is a band where you're like, nobody's like this. Like, they're unique. They have this new, unique sound that people haven't heard before, and they have a duo on stage, and there's still like this big band type of feel, but there's two people running. But then like you hear about subtle things, like Tyler mentioned at one point that there was this moment in a Killers video where their lead singer kind of like put his hand out in a certain way, like reaching out towards the camera, and Tyler said for some reason that like really stuck with him. And he like, you'll see Tyler do a similar like hand motion
really
during performances sometimes, but like no one would ever if he hadn't said that, no one would pick up that like, oh, he ripped off that hand motion that he does sometimes from this one specific Killers music video that wasn't really that famous,
right?
But it's like a sum of all those little things. And Tyler also talked about, and I think we both, could have shared plenty of examples of this too. Tyler's talked about how bands have showed him what not to do too. You see a band do something, and
as far as ripping off.
Yeah, or like Tyler said he hates when people on stage will say like, "Hey, how are the people on the right side doing?" And they mean stage right, but it's the crowd's left.
Yeah.
So if you go to a 21 Pilot show, you'll hear Tyler say, "How are the people on the left doing?" meaning stage right, because in the crowd, it's the left.
I get it. Yeah. Okay.
So like little things that, I'm sure, and you and I, I'm sure, have plenty of examples of that. Where like, this person did that, and I want to make sure I never, ever do that. Like, I'm never gonna write a song about a pickup truck.
Yeah, I mean, it's just. I don't know. But then I'm always trying. I'm self-aware to the point where like I question kind of everything that I say with, anything that I would might say with, assuredness.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, should I be saying this? There's always like that.
I feel
critical,
that. But there's things that like I'm sure you've seen other performances where you're like, that didn't go over really well here. I'm gonna try to stay away from that.
Yeah.
Maybe in less absolute terms than than I'm speaking, but yeah, you're like, hey.
I probably am more absolute than I think I am.
I tend to speak that way and then act a little less absolute. I think.
Oh yeah.
Like, I would never, and then like 2 years later, it's like, well, I would never play with tracks. Well, then I saw 21 Pilots. Yeah. I might play with tracks. The things that they're able to do. It just takes somebody to prove you wrong. But
yeah.
There was something I was thinking about earlier. We had this, longer conversation about lyrics. One of the things that pops up in my mind that really, stings me is this thought that the lyrics don't really matter that much. No one's listening to them anyway, unless they're, a super fan. That lyrics aren't what catches people's attention. And if the music's not that good anyway, then who cares about the lyrics? Which stings me because, as I mentioned at the beginning, that's the most important thing for me.
Lyrics.
The lyrics are. But at the same time, as a listener, I wouldn't love Switchfoot's lyrics if I didn't love their music.
Yeah, I think I'm. You might be disappointed, but I kind of feel I feel the same way as the person whoever you read that. I feel sort of the same way. I feel like if the music is no good, but the lyrics are great, then yeah, okay, I can respect you, I guess, but I probably won't buy your record or listen to you. I mean, Dylan might be the exception. I feel like the best way to listen to Dylan is just to have his lyrics and just read them as you're because he writes so many verses to songs. He'll write 7 verses to a song. But so it's always music first because it is music, right? So that's the way I think about it. But I don't really think about it. It's just something I feel like if the music is really good and the lyrics are kind of subpar maybe or just not that great, then I'll forgive that artist more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think the only reason that it's been hard for me is because I also feel more confident in my lyrical writing ability than in my musical writing ability. And so then I'm just like, oh, what am I doing?
Right.
And if it's a lyric, why am I writing lyrics first if it's like you said, it's music. It's literally called music.
Songs.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's always this is probably where you and I come to that same problem, that eminent problem, if you will. It's when you have this lyrical idea, but then you have to write music. It's oh shit, and that's kind of where I get with lyrics, because I feel like I've come to a point now where I'm confident in creating good chords and stuff to build off of, but then when it comes to the hook, the chorus, and then the lyrics, it's oh shit, there's that problem.
Yeah.
But then, but I have to almost force myself. I don't want to use that word, but change it, because if nothing changes, then nothing will change. This is something I learned in recovery.
Right.
That slogan. But it's true. If I want to change it, then I got to change my approach, because if I can write music more easily than lyrics, I should probably start with lyrics first. It only makes more sense. But my natural inclination is drawn to music. Where was I going with this? So and then the other thing too is I don't know about you, but I tend to write sequentially. In other words, I'll write the verse first and then the chorus, and maybe it doesn't have to be like that. You can write the chorus first, the hook first, and then put it all together. Be creative in your creative process.
I think actually, now that you mention that, a lot of times I do write the chorus first.
Really?
And I feel I've never really thought about this. We've been working together for a while, musically, and I never really thought about that, but I feel the chorus and the big idea is my strength, and the verses, I can come up with the lyrics to the verses, but writing the verses just musically I'm real weak at it, and coming up with the musical hook. Mm-hmm. I feel I can get the vocal hook, and I reach this big moment in a song. I almost start with this big moment that I'm thinking about.
Great, that's
but awesome. Then it's filling in the rest of it that's hard for me.
I think that's what you should do. Just sit one day and just write choruses all day.
Yeah.
Just do that. I mean, that's fucking A. I that's always I can't recall a specific example now, but I recommend, if you haven't done this before, to, after you've written a song, write about the process of writing that song. Everything you were feeling, what was happening to you that day, your challenges with the lyrics, the chords, the changes you did. It's super tedious. It's probably the most tedious thing you will find yourself in. But looking back now, I brought some of my books with me. It's like, oh, that's pretty cool. I forgot that this was influenced by this, or that the song used to sound like this. Because you'll gain an insight to your process, who you were, how crazy you are if you're crazy like me, and what you need to work on, etc., etc. Just a tiny window into the history of that song. Okay, so what I was getting at, like for me, because the lyrics definitely will elevate a song or completely drag it down, I think.
Yeah.
And getting stuck in those moments where like, oh, I got something great. The last time I'll bring up, I feel like my most favorite song right now is a song I'm going to put out soon called Fate. And I was so excited when I wrote the verses to that song. The melody was, I had written it on piano, and the lyrics were flowing, but I couldn't find that second change, that like chorus. It took me probably 3 or 4 revisions to finally get it. And that's an example of a song that I labored over. But if you listen to it, it flows, and that's what I try to strive for, is music that just kind of flows, that you put it on and you're just like, this is it.
Yeah, that song is interesting too, because it's one that like we started working on with the assassination, right? Mm-hmm. And like after you had written it. And we played it on tour, right?
We did play it.
We played it on tour, so we were working on the different parts, and I don't know how you felt about it, but I felt like coming at it from a songwriter's mentality, I was like, I love this song, but I felt like we weren't like adding the right parts to it as a band. Like it didn't feel like it had hit its stride as a full band song. Mm-hmm. But it's also like one of those, we mentioned earlier, kind of this debate about like other people's feelings versus your own feelings about the song, and I knew that you believed in that song so much, just from hearing how you talked about it, and then seeing you play it solo recently. It feels like it fit that vibe better almost. Like I felt like, at least personally, the things that I was adding to it as a guitarist didn't do the song justice.
Right.
I was like, this isn't like, okay, this part works, but it's not like, it's not really adding to the song the way the song deserves.
Right. I think so. My feelings about that are that the assassination, I suppose you're right in that song might not have been right for that band, because we were set up for more like hooky, sort of pop driven, the rock, straight ahead rock stuff.
Yeah.
I think. Whereas because it really just comes down to instinct. It's the musical instinct that we need to have for that song. It's a little more delicate and a little bit more subtle, if you will.
Right.
So me showing you guys the parts. I mean, we really tried to like pour all this energy into it, which works for other types of songs, but not for that one.
Yeah, and I think for that one, it was an example of a time crunch being bad, actually, too. Because of that, like, we were time crunching for tour, and we were in, like you said, we were in that flow of, like, more poppy rock, hook-driven stuff. So we were thinking that way, but I think if we had taken time to say, okay, wait a second, this song's different. Mm-hmm. Let's approach this differently. Let's sit with it and spend more time with it. I think it's, like, I don't think it's necessarily the case that band couldn't have played that song, but just that we would have had to take a different approach, and we didn't have time to do that. And then, it's not like it was bad on tour, but it was, like, I feel like, again, that song wasn't like done the justice.
Yeah, it didn't reach its full potential, I think that's what you said.
Yeah.
And that's true. Was there something you wanted to say about writing choruses first, and I feel like you had an idea as I was explaining?
I was just kind of thinking, like, another thing we mentioned at the beginning of this is, like, it's a very solitary feeling process. And the reason I think that it is that way, well, there's a lot of different reasons.
It has to be.
To some degree it does. Because it's your own thoughts that are coming up with this idea. Mm-hmm. But I feel like there's a certain point in the process where adding other people into it makes things better. But it's hard. It's hard because, like, even just people's schedules are hard. It's hard because, like, you're giving up a part of this, like, baby that you've invented. Mm-hmm. And it's hard because, like, you have to admit, and I think part of the thing about Friendship that made it a better record is there were times when I just admitted, like, I can't fix this. Like, I need help. And right. I brought to you songs like just the other day where I was like, this is the verse I have and I don't like it. Mm-hmm. And I'd appreciate the help in, like, restructuring. And you put a lot of work into that song. in especially with the verses, and that's one where I was like, I had this big like chorus just the other day, which we did rework that a bit too, but like that idea that I had, I felt really good about.
Yeah.
But it took like your strengths that were my weaknesses in that moment to make that song something that I'm proud of now.
Right, and I have a lot more respect for people, or in bands that are more collaborative like that, because as we were talking about earlier, I was always drawn to the mad genius types of people.
Yeah.
The Tom Yorks, the Lenny Kravitzes. Well, I don't really listen to Lenny Kravitz, but I still admire him because he played all the instruments on his record. Elliott Smith types, like Jeff Buckley's, and so like I put it on myself to like do all this work, but maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I shouldn't. But I think, where was I going with this? I lost my train of thought. Silence on the podcast. No! For the first time. Our first awkward pause, ladies and gentlemen. How about that?
Yeah, but I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons why, though, when you start to do that and you start to collaborate, things just get so much messier and harder.
Yes, okay, that's where I was going. Old man brain. It's weird because we're the same age, but...
Wait, so now I'm old.
I don't know, 21 Pilots? What are you talking about?
This newfangled millennial music.
So, yeah, collaboration. So, yes, okay, so that makes me appreciate the great artists even more. Like bring up U2 again. Like, they've been around for so long, like the 70s, like late 70s. It makes you really just like wonder, because like you said, things get messier. It's like being in a relationship but just with so many other people.
Yeah.
The fact that the right people, if you can find the right people, and then also be talented and driven and have the same goals. It's like playing the lottery almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, because I think about, like...
Bands are tough.
Of all the musicians that I've worked with, I think you're the only one that I've had, like, this length of a working relationship with. And that's only existed through us having two different projects that were going,
Yeah.
So it was like, all right, well, I'll play this role in your band, and you play this role in my band. But we both are, like, appeasing all aspects of what we want. Because, like, I can be the front man in my band, and I can write songs in my band. And you're doing that in yours, but then I can play like cool riffs that you wrote in your band, and like so a lot of those, like, we had two worlds going on at once, or that it's just like we have a good friendship. So if I'm like, hey, I have this song, like, can you help me with this, like writing part of this process, like there isn't like some long-term agreement type of like setup that we're trying to like force things to work. We're like allowing it to flow naturally. Whereas once you enter like a band agreement and you're like, okay, we're co-writers, and but then somebody who's not normally a co-writer wants to add something in. You say you have a drummer who doesn't write songs, but now all of a sudden he has this idea and feels some type of way about some certain thing, but doesn't say anything for a long time. Like all those situations start to arise.
See, and you're right, it gets messy. There's so many emotions and so many, like, even just scheduling, and then you wonder about people's commitment if you're the one that's you feel is the most driven, and then maybe somebody else feels that you're the asshole because you think that you're the most driven and deserve this, but you're really just the asshole. It just becomes very dramatic, almost like needlessly, and a lot of it just has to do with just speak the truth. But that's hard. It's simple to say, but it's really hard to do. Practice.
And it's really hard when your truth is something you can't fix too. Like I just for example, just to use myself, because I obviously like know what's going on with me, but like in the Judah Kim and the Assassination Band, my truth was that I would love to spend more time doing it, and that I couldn't. And that's not something I was going to be able to fix.
I think we both knew that too, and it was both a source of frustration.
It was, and it was also at times I just did put in the effort, and it drove me crazy because I had no time left for myself. And then there were times when I did give myself some time, and the result, the product wasn't as good. But at that point in time, I wasn't going to quit teaching.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't expect you to.
Right, but I'm like, in an ideal world, somehow, I don't know, I would be making enough money that I would have. So there's that truth there, that like both things are true. I would love to spend more time doing it, and I can't. And then when that's one person, then you have 5 people with incompatible wants and needs.
It's just it's very tough because that band specifically, I knew because Bob and I started that band.
Yeah.
Shout out to Bob, we love you. Bob and I started that band, and then we started recruiting people, and it was like, Bob then we got a drummer together, and then that was like via Facebook. My older brother, and then Bob got Isaac, and then we had switched drummers, I think, or did we have we switched drummers before. Then, but it was always through it was always sort of secondhand. It didn't necessarily come together organically in the way, like a band from high school comes together.
Yeah,
you know? So it wasn't like we didn't start as friends,
right?
Which I think probably helps, because then what happens is you have that level of honesty with your friends, and that's so important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's like it is interesting that it came together that way, because the relationship developed over time. Like, those, especially for the time that we were in the band, like those were the people that I was hanging out with the most, besides my girlfriend or a close friend here or there. So you're spending a lot of time together, and those friendships develop. But you're right, it's like a different thing than the organic development of like friendships turning into a band. And I think there's pros and cons both ways, because like I think like if you and I were to sit down right now and say let's start a band, we could have a really honest conversation about each other's strengths and weaknesses and how we would figure out what the structure would look like. Like we could do that because we know each other really well. Whereas if we were like looking for somebody to join the band, we can describe what we're looking for, but if we don't really know the person that well, we don't know if they're going to be a great fit or not.
Yeah.
So, there's pros and cons on either side. Because you can be more upfront with somebody that's new. But maybe not. But with like I said, with a close friendship, you can say like, look, I know that you're this way sometimes, and I'm this way sometimes, and like, how would this work?
Yeah. I mean, I think it just I think it might just start leaning more towards people pulling people from the internet. Like, not that it hasn't already through Craigslist. I mean, I've found plenty of people off Craigslist before in other bands in my life. But it only makes sense that it'll move more towards that, especially as people become more isolated and the tech age obliterates us from being in touch with each other. That's another reason why this conversation is so important, because going back to it's a work in isolation, I think generally the more solo artists that are out there can certainly probably hopefully relate to the idea that it's a work in isolation. And I have to my bless my girlfriend's heart, because I tell her we can't hang out sometimes because I'm writing, and she has been nothing but supportive towards me for it. So I value that so much. But then these things that I go through here, it's like I feel weird sharing it with her. I mean, I can not in that because I can't express my feelings to her, but it's just that okay, who else is going to be able to relate to for example, this I struggle with. Sometimes a line will rhyme perfectly, and it'll make perfect sense, and it'll be it'll make perfect sense, and it'll be very real, but it'll still sound corny.
Oh yeah.
Like those kind of problems.
Yeah.
Like, so how do you know what I'm saying? So how do I tell my girlfriend that and her to actually relate to it in a serious way? But on that note, how do you deal with that? Because you want to be. You want to come off as real, and that this piece of work is real, these 2 lines, but it sounds fucking corny. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I can't give you an example, but I know you know what I'm talking about.
I do. And that's something that, like, as songwriters, we're just like, I know exactly what you're thinking about. I've been in that exact situation. I think with any relationship and any working, with any jobs, there's certain aspects of that. Like, Christy and I are both teachers. So there's a lot of things that we can relate to each other, but she's also right now she's teaching first graders and I teach middle schoolers, and the differences, there's like sometimes we just look at each other, we're just like, what are you talking about? Like,
Right.
like this kid like in
But at least there's other teachers that can relate to you.
yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
and that happens every day. Like
Yeah.
I talk with the other teachers that teach the same kids every day, a lot.
And other songwriters, it's like we're in this bubble kind of, and like
Yeah.
it just maybe it's just
Yeah.
me. Maybe I'm just an asshole, but I feel just like there's a competitive vibe out there. It's like dog.
No, there is, and I think it's hard for two, like I describe them as frontmen, like people like us who are like, I don't think, personally, I don't think I would be fully satisfied if I wasn't in front of the mic. You know, if I didn't have something to say and sing.
Right.
You know, people like us who want to write songs and want to have a voice. It's hard for people like us to become friends in a lot of situations because it feels fake at first. Like it feels like this guy's just trying to sell me his thing, and I'm trying to sell him my thing, and that's it.
Yep.
And he's coming to my show only because I want like he wants me to go to his sort of thing, and like I have that feeling about people all the time. But then like so it just makes it. Now when I think about some of the front people in bands that I'm really good friends with, like Alex Sadek's one, but I was friends with him before I was like really in bands. And for you and me, I think part of it, I don't know, maybe it's just like lucky that we've been able to become such good friends, because I never really felt that fakeness at first. It was like, Judah's got this cool song. He was watching Ships. He played at an open mic, and I was like, that
Steel
sounds
City,
cool.
shout out.
Yes. You know, we went to so many open mics. Eventually, I think we met, and then there was like a break because I stopped playing music for a bit. But then when I came back to it, I was like, hey, Judah, you still go to open mics? Like, let's go, you know, see a few. And we never had that competitive... I mean, like, there were some thoughts, like, sometimes where I'm just like, oh, wow, he's so good at this, and I'm not that good at that. Or, you know, that sort of thing.
Really? Oh.
Yeah, like, oh, he's got such a better voice than I do. How do I compete with this? But then it's also like, but he's my friend who came with me to this thing, and we're supporting each other. And then it's almost like the two of us are being supportive, and it's like, oh, but there's still those other people we're competing with. Like, oh, look.
Yeah, I know, and it's just like that vibe of competitive, like, I don't know. I think that what you're saying earlier about people coming to shows just because they feel like they have to because they're selling you stuff. I almost feel like I was thinking for a while, and I said this on Bob's podcast, that like you shouldn't do that because then you're not going to create like authentic fandom. But I'm leaning towards more like, you know what, maybe it should be an obligation, because the way music is, especially since we get it for free, like something has to change in that. Something has to be an answer to that. It can't just be, well, it is what it is, you know?
Yeah. I think in general, because of where we are with technology right now, there's a lot of things the world is figuring out and we don't have answers to. And I tell it to my students too when we're talking about technology related things. It's like there are some things that you teach that the adults do have figured out. You know, like I'll teach you how to solve an equation, and I'm sure after the thousands of years of math that this is the way, like this is a good way to do it. But when you're navigating technology, I don't have answers. Like the adults don't have the answers right now, and the kids I think are going to figure a lot of this stuff out. But like it comes into play with this music being free right now because that's new, and yeah, what is the industry going to do to shift so that musicians can still support themselves? Or I mean it's a famous thing that they can't, but you know what I mean. Like there's money somewhere that. And then people will talk about, I have the next great idea. Like, you just have to be on Patreon, just make videos.
Right.
And maybe that is an answer. I don't know. I've never actually tried it, so I don't want to, like, talk down to it. But there's things like that or streaming services like a Patreon where people are paying just to interact with you almost, or, like, see videos every once in a while. And maybe they got your music for free, but they're just, like, a fan of who you are. So seeing you do things is something that they'll...
Support.
Yeah.
Are they really listening?
Yeah.
Bastards.
Yeah, or it's just like maybe it's like crowdfunding for a record, for example. People aren't buying your record, but they'll donate $20 to help you record, and then if you get a project like that funded, it's like, oh, well, people actually did pay for me to record this. It's just in a different way.
It's in a different way, for sure. And I think, again, I covered this on the Bobcast, episode 176. I think that, you have to create an audience first before they will listen to you. This is just a theory I have, because I'm watching some other artists blow up. You have to, like, on your social media, create, like, a bunch of followers somehow. Make your social media interesting first, and then, they'll listen to you. Then you can show that awesome song that you have. I mean, this is really just... I think this is what it is it not? I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, I think you see that in some sorts of, like, there's the people, it's like a common Twitter joke that, somebody has a famous tweet and then they link their SoundCloud. But I think you're right in the sense that there's a lot of people out there who have these huge followings, and we kind of joke that it's for nothing. But, I mean, they have huge followings for some reason. It just doesn't seem the same as it used to be. Like, it used to be that you were a famous musician, so then you had a large following. But you're right. It seems like you need to somehow generate a following and an interest first, and then you put out something good and people will actually listen. Because, like, I can put out...
And I feel like that takes time. Like, months, even years, maybe.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And for some people, like, the other thing that's hard about it, it takes time, but there's no, like, answer of how to do it. Like, it's not like, oh, you just do this, this, and this, and then you have a big following.
Yeah, it's the salesman game.
Yeah. You could, maybe you get on tour with a big artist, and then, like, that gets you a lot of following. Or maybe you just post pictures of flipping water bottles or videos of flipping water bottles, and for some reason people love it. And
something to garner some sort of attention.
Yeah.
And that's what I feel like that's what the landscape has become. And it's going back to the process, it certainly affects mine, or has affected mine. Like, oh, what will sell? Maybe it's because my songs suck. But maybe it's probably the more right answer is just that no one gives a shit, first of all. I shouldn't say it like that, but no one's really listening as intently as you want them to. So it's like you have to not let that affect you. You have to, like, deliberately remind yourself that, you're you you do you, and once you have that audience, then then they'll listen.
Yeah, and I think, like, also part of the result of the technology right now is that, like, anyone can put out something that sounds somewhat okay, and because of that, you end up in a field of people where if your product is really good, it's still actually hard for people to tell that it's really good, because there's many people, like, if Judah Kim is playing a show at the Grape Room this weekend, what's the difference between Judah Kim playing the Grape Room and all these other people playing the Grape Room? Like, if we seem like we're in the same, like, stage as other people who, like, theoretically, somebody could be, like, 17, never written a song before, they write one song, are able to record it in a way that, like, just couldn't have been done in the past, like, and it sounds really good in terms of quality. It's just, there's a lot of people out there like that right now that they either don't need to save up a ton of money to go into the studio, or they don't need somebody to take a chance on them to work with them in the studio. Like, they can just buy some, like, kind of starter pack almost for recording, and then they can record songs that sound pretty good.
Yeah.
They have to spend time, don't get me wrong. It's not like it's just, oh, anybody can just buy a couple mics and be a good musician, but they have to spend some time learning it. But I don't know, it's just an easier, like, level of access to become somebody who puts out music. And it makes it harder. Like you said, it seems like people don't really care. Yeah. Because they're inundated with, like, there's just, the market is so oversaturated with people trying to...
And then all of this goes through my head as I'm writing a song.
Yeah.
And it's toxic. It's not, like, healthy. And I don't think that it is... And see, the thing about it is that you can turn it off. It's my choice to look away. Yeah. So and it's like with alcohol. They say, like, every adult has to, like, develop their relationship with it. And it's very much the same. It's social media technology and the ever-changing landscape of music. You have to, like, not let those voices creep in, because it will pollute your intent, I think.
Yeah.
And that's where I find myself today, in a place where I've kind of like realized that, and I'm trying to like detach myself, and when I'm writing now, follow where the music is, and not like try to force the ideas to be something it's not. I feel like it has worked for me in some situations, and I feel like it hasn't always polluted every single thing I've done, but it's definitely there, and it's definitely shaped me. Good and bad. I think it's a very beautiful thing. Just if you look at it in terms of a work of art in itself, like your life as a songwriter, how you've changed and how the world has changed, and your reaction to that in your work and in your own process.
Yeah.
You know.
I think like you said, you have to like kind of choose to look away from it, and it's almost like in an ideal world, if you could, you would create an isolation. I mean, maybe even if that is collaboratively, like maybe it's a group of people working still in isolation, meaning in isolation of you're not thinking about marketing, you're not thinking about social media, you're just thinking about the art, and then afterward you say, okay, I have this thing, can I market it? How should I market it? How do I do all those other things? Or in an ideal world, you say, hey team of marketers, here's this thing I created, you do your job, and I'm going to go back to keep creating, but we don't have that
I suppose if you had enough money, you could certainly hire people, because it's just exhausting. It can be very exhausting to like put so much energy into a piece of an album, a song, let alone an album, and then just like, all right, I'm not done because I have to market it. I'm like 50% there.
Yeah.
Like you spent a ton of hours writing and then recording and then mixing and mastering. Like this is like a month, sometimes year long process. And then you're like, oh, I'm not done. I have to like market it now. It's like, fuck.
That's what makes it so draining. And then you have to try to get people to come to shows that they don't really want to come to or they can't. And you're doing all of this on your own. That's what makes it. That's what has put me in a situation, at least right now, where I'm waiting. Like I'm just kind of taking some time off because I just can't do it all the time, all on my own.
It's crazy because it's also a really cool thing because you can do it all your own. But
right.
How?
Theoretically.
How to do it right and successfully.
Yeah.
All right, Kevin. Well, we've done plenty of time here. Is there anything else you want to do before we wrap up this great first episode?
No, I don't think so. We could talk forever. Endlessly. Some people are probably tired of the sound of my voice. Yeah, hopefully not yours.
Probably. No, just kidding. Probably both of ours. They probably cut out like 1 minute in after hearing my long ass introduction.
Or after I started with how's everybody doing? You can't answer me. They're like, this guy's. I don't want to listen to another joke like that.
That was terrible. Fucking loser. No, just kidding. Well, anyway, thanks for being my guest.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Truly honored. I'll see. I'd love to have you back. As this thing develops, I'll probably post about it on social media. Like everybody out there, like Kevin Cox on Facebook. Exactly. It's spelled exactly how you think it would be.
COX.
Yeah, COX. Yeah, I guess maybe not. For all you perverts out there. So Kevin Cox on Spotify, on Apple Music, everywhere music is sold online these days. You can probably even find him on Amazon because CD Baby.
Yeah.
He's on Facebook, Insta. Is it Kevin Cox Music on?
Kevin Z Cox.
Kevin Z Cox on Insta. Yeah. And Twitter as well. Yeah. Thank you very much for joining me. My name is Judah Kim, Judahkim. Thanks for joining me on this first episode of The Process with Judah Kim.